Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for GIS After Dark, the February edition. My name is Cassie Hansen, and I am the Program Director for the GIS program in Environmental Sciences and Policy at Johns Hopkins University. This presentation is being recorded, and it will be available on our GIS JHU YouTube channel once the video is processed. This speaker series is designed to highlight the amazing work that industry GIS professionals, JHU students, faculty, and alumni are doing in the field of GIS. So let's get started. So for those of you joining tonight for your first time, you may not be familiar with our GIS program. We're a Master's of Science program at Johns Hopkins University. It's 100% online. Many of our students' work is highlighted. You may have seen their work across social media outlets, such as the Where the Water Flows map in the upper left-hand corner, or perhaps on the big screen at the Esri Users Conference. So our students' work is everywhere. So for those of you who are interested in our 100% online program, I would invite you to attend our information session that we're hosting on February 17th at two different times, 12 p.m. Eastern Time and 7:30. Natalie has provided the links in the chat. So if you're interested to learn more about the program, I'd welcome you to sit down and chat with me at that time. So let's just go ahead and take a little bit of a deeper dive into what GIS is. So for those of you who are not familiar with GIS, it's an acronym that stands for Geographic Information Systems, and it allows for the creation and collection of geospatial information in the form of maps or apps. Representing what is known is an overall goal for any GIS professional through the use of data collection, analysis, map creation, as well as application uses. And we're always trying to find and know about the what, the when, the where, and the how of our geospatial world. And we've seen GIS leveraged as a power, data visualization, and analytics tool for making decisions based on science and facts that have real world consequences. And I always highlight the Hopkins dashboard just because it had such a large global impact. And we definitely saw the use. This is a perfect example of data and visualization. All right, so that brings me to tonight's presenter. I'm so pleased to welcome Lauren Tierney, who is a senior project manager of the mapping and cartography at Esri. Tonight, she's going to share with us insights on the mapping and spatial analytics software used to elevate cartography and map visualization and reveal the design process that she uses to tell stories and communicate through maps. Before joining Esri in 2024, Lauren was a senior graphics reporter at the Washington Post, as well as a graphics editor at National Geographic Magazine. So she holds a master's degree in geography from the University of Oregon and specializes in mapping environment, climate, wildfire, and adventure topics. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you everyone for having me. It's really nice to be speaking with you all this evening. Thank you, Cassie, for the wonderful introduction. You move fast because those two maps on the side of my image literally made those last week. So thank you for including those. I saw a lot of people joining from a lot of parts of the country, including the East Coast. So I live on the East Coast, experienced a lot of snow. So I decided to map that snow last week and made those maps that Cassie shared. So thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about mapping and cartography at Esri. I'm a senior product manager of cartography at Esri. I've been at Esri for about a little over a year and a half now. And so I'll share kind of a little bit of background about my journey to Esri, especially for the students in the audience, just kind of sharing that career path. I'll give a little bit of background about what Esri does and the software. And then really the majority of the presentation will be focused on mapping and cartography resources that a lot of staff and work goes into to really help support the mapping, GIS, and cartography communities. So I'll be going into a little bit of that as well. Okay, so first to start, a little bit about my journey to where I'm at Esri. So as Cassie mentioned, I went to the University of Oregon. I did my undergraduate degree there. Grew up most of my life in Oregon, so I also saw there's some folks joining from Oregon in the chat as well. So good to have you and everyone here. So I did my undergraduate at University of Oregon, and as many undergrads do, switch majors a couple of times. So I really liked science, and I also really liked writing. And so when I was leaving high school, I was trying to figure out, where do I kind of want to go? And so, started with biology. Once I got to college, I was like, well, you know what? Let me try out journalism a little bit. Like, I love writing. I really am interested in a lot of the design aspects of it. So let me try a little bit of that. Interestingly enough, I just didn't really mesh with those journalism classes. It was very like versus kind of a team environment. It felt very much like everyone's kind of like out competing each other, which there's parts of that make sense, but it just I didn't really find my groove there. So I switched back to the sciences from journalism. And then I was taking, oh gosh, I think it was my sophomore year. I was taking general education requirements, trying to take some different things. And there was a climatology class offered in the geography department. I've always been a huge weather nerd. I'm still a huge weather nerd, love weather. And I saw that and I was like, I can take this class, and geography is even a major in college. And so I took that climatology class and I absolutely loved it. I then signed up for like the next term's class with that professor, the next term's class. I think it was like advanced climatology. And then there was like a paleoclimatology class that she offered where we were going out and doing like tree coring, where you use the little device to core the tree to see how old the tree is and look for different patterns. And so I promptly switched my major to geography. So so really kind of found my place in geography, and I was like heads down on the climatology weather science path. And then as part of the major, you're required to take GIS classes. And so I took my first one. It was kind of hitting the basics. At the time, it was using the software ArcMap, which now Esri has put out a lot of different softwares, but that was when I was in school, so I was learning that. And then it was my second GIS class where the professor he just connected GIS to like the real world and how it's used for different projects, different just solving a lot of the world's problems and trying to figure things out. And so I was like hooked, and I was like, well, maybe I want to do GIS and mapping instead of weather. And took a cartography class after that class, and yeah, I was hooked. And so I'd switch gears and was all in on GIS and cartography. During this whole time, I did have a consistent major though, Spanish, which has been very helpful. So that double major has been very useful, as a lot of the places I worked later on, there were a lot of first language Spanish speakers, and so I've gotten to keep that up and even present at conferences in Spanish. So that was the constant major there. Once I figured things out, I decided to stay on at the University of Oregon for a master's degree. So I got my master's in geography, and I worked in the University of Oregon infographics lab. So it's a cartography lab that's within the University of Oregon geography department. And I learned like the hands-on mapping skills in that lab. I learned a lot in my classes. I learned a lot working on my thesis, but working in the infographics lab as a student, it gave me that real world knowledge of working on projects, working on deadlines, working with stakeholders to get feedback on maps. And it really set the stage for a lot of what I did there. So there I worked on a wildlife migration atlas that was focused on migratory ungulates, which, if you don't know what an ungulate is, they're hooved mammals. So if you think deer, moose, pronghorn, elk, those kind of fall within that. After my master's degree, I went on to work at National Geographic. I started in National Geographic Magazine as a production assistant on the magazine graphics team. I then moved as to a graphics editor role on the books and atlases team. And then I moved back to the magazine as a graphics editor, working on making maps for the magazine. I was there for about 3 years. And then I moved to the Washington Post, where I was a graphics reporter. So I worked on the graphics team there, making maps and data visualizations. And there I moved up as well to a graphics editor role, leading a small team, and then focus more on the graphics reporting side. And then now I work at Esri, and as senior product manager of cartography. For the students here who are interested in a career path in cartography, I just want to point out, just very briefly, until Esri, none of those job titles had the word cartography in it. And so I do like to point that out, is like sometimes those jobs in mapping, cartography, GIS, sometimes it has that in the title, oftentimes not. So I always encourage people kind of look at those broader job titles and kind of read the fine print of like, does it involve maps, graphics, data analysis, data visualization. So it's only till recently I had cartography in my job title. So now I work at Esri, and as a product manager, a big part of the work that I do is talking to customers and users of the software that Esri makes, particularly focused on how it works and doesn't work for cartographers and map makers. So hearing feedback on things that work well for making maps, for different projects people work on in cartography, and ways that the software that Esri makes could be improved. So Esri makes a wide variety of different softwares and products. Some of the ones that, if you're in the GIS realm, that you might be familiar with are ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Online. Those are the main foundational software products that Esri makes. And these are really the foundational products for working with GIS, for making maps, both for print, for web, and managing databases. Really just a wide variety of use cases focused on mapping, 3D, imagery, analytics, and data management. So Esri makes the software that kind of falls under this ArcGIS umbrella. So those are the foundational products. Esri makes many more different software products as well, including a wide variety of apps. Many of them are listed here. In my work as a product manager of cartography, my work doesn't always overlap with all of these. It really depends on who the customer is and what tools they're using to make their maps. So some map makers that I'll meet with in different map making teams, cartography teams, they'll use only ArcGIS Pro, which is the desktop GIS mapping software that Esri makes. Some of them use only Map Viewer, which is a web mapping platform that Esri makes. Some of them, and this is most often the case, are using multiple of these. And so one of the big things, pieces of information I gather as a product manager focusing on cartography, is are cartographers and map makers able to move well between those? So if you start in the desktop software and then you want to make a map for the web, or you want to make a dashboard, such as the Johns Hopkins COVID dashboard that Cassie highlighted earlier, is that process simple? Is it not? What are some ways that it could be improved so that in my area of focus, so that cartographers can have the tools they need to make the maps that they need to do for their jobs and for their work? We have an entire product management division at Esri. And so I focus on cartography, which is considered a capability, but we have product managers that only focus on ArcGIS Pro, for example, or ArcGIS Story Map. So we have a wide variety of product managers that are really working to meet with customers and connect that feedback from the customers to the development teams and the product engineers that are working to build and maintain and improve the software that Esri makes. Also not listed on this are a lot of different other things that map makers use that fall under my umbrella. One of those is production mapping tools, so especially for topographic mapping. So a lot of there's extensions for that Esri produces, as well as extensions so that people can move from the Esri software to Adobe Illustrator, for example, if they're working in more of a design space or working with GIS and Adobe software products. So hopefully for those that are familiar with Esri tools, thank you for sticking with me because much of that was probably repeat. And for those that are new to GIS and kind of this topic, I hope that was helpful and gave some background as of the software that Esri produces for GIS and mapping and a lot of those GIS related capabilities. So for this broad audience, though, I do want to highlight a lot of the different resources that Esri produces across many, many teams. And this is not my team. Includes my team, but many teams across Esri. There's teams in education and software development and product design and really a whole bunch of groups across Esri. And so this is very much highlighting a lot of work that goes on in the company that I hope are resources for students and folks that are interested in mapping geography and GIS. So one of the big ones is the ArcGIS blog. So Esri has an ArcGIS blog, and this is where a lot of the new information about things Esri is doing is published out to the world. So this is all freely accessible. Different articles range from, what's new in the latest software update for all of those different software products that I listed before. But for this group, especially for mapping cartography, which is more of the subject for this talk, is cartography tips and tricks. And so there's a lot of different posts that get posted on the blog in a lot of different areas, but a lot of them are tips and tricks. So I've highlighted two that are recent ones that just came out last month, but it's things that are sometimes very software specific. So sometimes if you're working specifically with ArcGIS Pro, it's a step-by-step of how you do that there. But this one, for example, building a bivariate color scheme, this is one that it does show you how to do it in the Esri software, but it has a really beautiful introduction of just like what a bivariate color scheme is and how that even comes together. And so for those interested in geography and GIS and cartography, I really want to point people to the ArcGIS blog. It's freely accessible and it has a pretty good search function as well. So you can search cartography, you can search mapping. If you are specifically looking for a particular piece of software that Esri makes and looking for blogs on that, you can even search by that as well. In my very short tenure at Esri, I have published a couple different blogs on there. But people that have been there much longer have an entire catalog of different resources that they put together. Emily Merriam is a cartographer that I always like to highlight. Again, there's many. John Nelson, who, if you guys are in the GIS space, you most likely have heard of him, but he does a lot of blog posts, and there's really just a lot of amazing work that's going up on here, and both in cartography and mapping tips and tricks, but also what are some new things in the software to try out that will hopefully help your work. The other thing to highlight is Esri tutorials. So again, another free resource for those for students, professionals, those interested in geography and map making. A lot of them are step-by-step. A lot of them have videos as well. A former cartographer that used to work at Esri, her name's Heather Smith. She put together a wide variety of cartography ones up on the tutorials. And so one of the ones I've highlighted is designing choropleth maps. And so again, there's helpful tips and tricks for if you're using the software, but there's a lot of just really good knowledge. No matter the tools you're using, there's some really great resources up on the tutorials website for making maps, designing maps, thinking critically about your map design as well. And again, in this presentation, I'm highlighting a lot of mapping and cartography specific resources. If you're interested in satellite imagery, there's stuff for that. If you're interested in more of the coding side of things, or Python, if you're familiar with that, there are resources for you on the blog, and all of these resources that I'm highlighting here. And again, freely accessible, and a lot of great use cases for just kind of understanding maps and map design and what goes into that. The other one I'll highlight is Esri video. There's also, I'll highlight later, a lot of resources on YouTube as well, which is, again, I'll keep saying freely accessible, but Esri video, this has been a space that's really been a lot of efforts been put towards getting more video resources up here and video tutorials, and very short ones too. If you can see in the slides here, some of these videos are just 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and it's really just meant to highlight one specific part of the software to hopefully make it a little bit more accessible for people to say, like, okay, like, how do I search for color ramps? Like, how do I search for color schemes? There's a lot of different efforts being put to making those really short videos to hopefully make it just kind of quick help pieces that people can search for. There's also some really cool, just like, if you're here, especially, I mean, for everyone here, but especially if you're, you know, newer to GIS or kind of more general public, like, there's some really great videos on here too, just like discussing maps. So one of the ones here in the top corner, for the last couple of years at the annual user conference, they've had this video play of this thing called Mappy Hour, and they have some of our very talented cartographers here. We have Ken Field, E. Punt, and Nathan Shepard talk about maps. So last year in this video I have highlighted, just talking about maps that have been shown in the Esri map book each year. And so really going over their favorites and discussing the design and what they like about the design. So there's a lot of these videos up there as well, if you just enjoy learning about maps and hearing people talk about maps as well. And then, as promised, YouTube. So Esri does have an ArcGIS YouTube channel where a lot of those videos that are on the Esri videos webpage, they're highlighted here. But then there's also some individual cartographers that work at Esri that I just want to highlight their work and their YouTube pages. Sarah Bell, she works on the ArcGIS Maps for Adobe team. So she works on the team that's responsible for helping build and really keep that that extension for people moving from working with ArcGIS and being able to use the Adobe Illustrator capabilities. She works directly with that team and has a lot of really great resources for working with maps in ArcGIS and Adobe Illustrator. And then as mentioned previously, John Nelson, who, if you guys are in the GIS world, you've most likely heard of him, but if you haven't, highly recommend checking both of these folks out. But John Nelson does some really great videos, and they're highly entertaining too, in terms of just like the energy. And he does his cartography from a little shed in Michigan, and there's often kind of B-roll of chickens running around his yard as well. So it's really enjoyable, and highly recommend checking out some of those YouTube resources too if you're interested in mapping cartography. And so I really hope that kind of highlights a lot. And again, this is many teams across the entire company that put together the resources and the blogs, the tutorials, the videos, and highlighting stuff on YouTube. And it's really for this audience, for students, for general public, for faculty. I hope it just kind of inspires you and gets you connected to different resources that might be available for yourself, for students. And because I make maps, I love maps, and I want to be sure to highlight all of the work that the cartographers at Esri are doing in practically every corner of the company. So just a few ways to find those. I do want to touch on cartographic inspiration. So if YouTube and the tutorials and the blogs haven't kind of inspired you fully, there's a couple more resources. One of the big ones is the Esri Map Gallery. So every year at the user conference, there is an in-person gallery. It's this huge room, and there's skylights and all this stuff. It's gorgeous. And people bring their maps to put up in the map gallery. There's also digital submissions as well. Cassie is one of the judges for one of the competitions, so really grateful to have her participate. And it's just truly incredible. People submit maps from all over the world. And so also want to highlight to this group, if you're making maps, if you've made maps, this is completely open to submit your maps to every year. I should have, before this talk, checked the deadline for this year. I should know it off the top of my head. I unfortunately don't, but I think there is still time. But one of the great things that, and why I highlight this resource, is you can go all the way back to 2018 to see maps that have been submitted here. So it's really a great place to look for inspiration. You can, there's a search function, so you can kind of search by, maps of environment, of climate, award winners, different, and you can also see what different tools people use to build their maps, whether it's ArcGIS Pro, Map Viewer, Adobe Illustrator, a lot of different things. So just want to highlight that if you're ever, working on a map, designing a map, which, I've been making maps for a long time. I get stuck. I get like brain freeze when I'm trying to think of designs. I often go to resources like this just to see, what are people doing? Like, what are some of the cartographic designs out there? Where I go for inspiration? The other one is maps.com. So if you literally type in maps.com, that is an Esri website. And it is a team of folks that are really curating a lot of great maps that are out there on the web. So they have a team that are making some of the maps, but more often it's people submitting maps. So this map here that I have highlighted on the Arctic reindeer herders, this was a submitted map. So this is a map that was actually in the map gallery, and it was a submitted map. And so they have a space where the map is highlighted, but they're also writing, there's a written article about the map. They speak with the cartographer, the person who's made the map, and there's a wide variety of these up on maps.com, as well as video interviews as well. So there's already a couple Esri cartographer interviews up on the website where you can kind of hear those cartographers' experience kind of behind the scenes and how they do their work. So this is also a great one for inspiration for if you're making maps, working in GIS and cartography, or again, for those who are just here and love maps, like this is a great one. They also have a newsletter too, so you can just subscribe into your inbox. Anyway, so that's an easy way to just get a dose of mapping inspiration. And then kind of as we're starting to close out, I do want to, so at the beginning, I did mention part of my role as a product manager is gathering feedback from customers. So that's talking to people at conferences, particularly the Esri user conferences. That's getting feedback from blog posts, also from customer meetings, just a wide variety of things. But one of the big areas that we get feedback as a company on software development is the Esri community. So this is a space where you can sign up for an account. There are kind of community threads. People post ideas, they post questions. The software development teams in a lot of parts of the company are actively following and responding to activity on Esri community. So it's a place where if you have ideas like, wow, I wish this tool existed, or like, I wish I could do this, or hey, how do you do this? The Esri community is a really, really great space for that. And it's also a great space to see like, okay, are other people having similar concerns as me, or has someone else like figured out a workaround to this, or has someone else posted the same issue, but someone from the software development team has posted, oh, you can do it this way. So highly recommend checking out the Esri community if you're working with Esri software, if you have ideas, thoughts, feedback. This is definitely one of the big places to go if you're working with Esri software. Again, maybe not to everyone in this group, but isn't applicable to everyone in this group. But if you are working with Esri stuff, this is an area where in my role, I'm actively following the space and seeing what people are doing and the ideas people have. And then I also want to highlight student opportunities at Esri. So some of these you may know about, but since we have students in the audience, Esri has a lot of different student programs. So there's a summer internship program and there's a student assistantship program. Unfortunately, the internship program has closed already for this summer, but it's something to keep an eye out for the following year. So that usually opens up in the fall. So it's very much something to keep an eye on in the fall for those students. And then the student assistantship program is very much open. It's basically an application for student volunteers at the Esri user conferences. And many people that work at Esri started here. Like they started out as volunteers. They started out when they were students. My manager started, like he got connected to Esri through the student assistantship program and has now been here, I think he said like 13 years now. And so it's a really great resource for students getting involved. There's a lot of different opportunities in different regions too. So for example, next week is the Esri Fed GIS. That's on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. The Esri User Conference that happens in July, that's in San Diego. So there's a lot of different regional opportunities too, especially for those considering travel. So highly recommend if you're a student checking this out. And I will share these with Cassie as well, because I've shared a lot of links and different slides and stuff. And so I want to make sure people can get access to these links. But I just included links to a lot of the resources that I shared for if you're really interested in cartography, mapping. I hope you find inspiration and learning resources in these places. And one of the things that could have been a whole presentation in of itself is obviously AI. It's a big topic. Everyone's talking about it. I will share these links, but Esri has a lot of public facing links that detail what they're looking at AI, policies around AI, and how they're taking it very seriously. And then circling back to the ArcGIS blog, blogs are being posted of like what's new with AI assistance, which is a big area of focus right now. So there's a lot of work being there that some of it's freely available now, some of it's in like a beta stage where it's testing, and then some of it's still under development. So there's a lot of resources there that can provide more details than I'm able to tonight in this space. And really, I just thank you all for having me. I really love presenting in spaces like this, and I hope this sends you away with a lot of different maps to look at, ways to make maps to look at, and hopefully provides just a little lens into the work that Esri is doing in mapping and cartography, and hopefully can be helpful to you in your work or just love of maps. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Let's give her a virtual round of applause. You know, we have some great questions coming in here, so I want to make sure we have time for those. But wonderful resources, and I think even just going to the map gallery for inspiration, it's such a good reminder, you know, to say, I'm making this sort of map, and it's okay to identify a map that you want to either simulate and then approve upon, or, you know, make it in a different location. That's perfectly fine. And I think also what I like about the map gallery is all the different software. They identify software, data sets that they're using to make that particular map to help you kind of come up with the map idea. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the questions here. So the first question comes from Mark. Mark, thank you so much. Nice to have you here tonight. Mark wants to know about how AI has affected the cartography, how AI is, you know, from the position of cartographic workflows. How is AI kind of helping out here?
Yeah, so I can touch on that. I can touch on that briefly. So it's very much it's an ever evolving space, and so you'll see that I was watching some recordings from a conference that took place in the fall. It was the North American Cartographic Information Society conference, which all of their sessions are freely available on YouTube. So another YouTube highlight. But there were a lot of sessions in that were talking about AI and cartography and what it means and where it's going. And even in those, those presentations were in October, it's very much a lot of question marks, a lot of exploring and looking at like how that affects our cartography. How does it help cartography? How does it become a new tool for cartography? And there's a lot of ongoing work at Esri and elsewhere on like where this is going and how these tools kind of factor in. I mentioned briefly with that last slide, Esri's been doing a lot of work with AI assistants, so kind of some like helper tools basically to kind of help move things along or kind of do some simple tasks that maybe instead of searching through the toolboxes and whatnot. One thing that I always like to highlight that is like tied in with AI that people may not suspect is, for example, if you're working in ArcGIS Pro, the search bar is very much powered by that. And like, that's what I use that all of the time, like searching for tools and stuff rather than kind of going through toolboxes and stuff. And that's very much powered by AI and is like a way to kind of help kind of connect the dots a little bit faster, find those resources. But in all honesty, it's very much evolving, just following the research, following what's going on in the world and different companies and different use cases as well. So I know that's not like a definitive answer, but from what I've seen, there really aren't definitive answers yet because there's so much research and unknowns there. But it's something that definitely focusing on and keeping track of. Yeah.
So Brianna's question along the lines of AI, and you answered it, but just she wants to know, do you think Esri is kind of leaning in, heavily to AI, or do you think like approaching with caution?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the term heavily. And I don't know if I use the word cautious if that makes sense. So it's I think, well, definitely with caution as one should with like being aware and following the research and testing things and being being careful with like different policies and whatnot. And so definitely with caution, but very much not. And why I avoid heavily is not abandoning like the core principles of what we do at Esri is like making sure the software functions, making sure it works for the tasks and the work that our customers need to use, and AI as a tool to help in that work versus like jumping to one thing. It's very much in a process where it's in sync. So working on making things the best they can be for the customers, and AI is as part of that process, if that makes sense, versus like leaning heavily just to one side. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Another question that Brianna had as well. I think this was talking about the student internships, and she was just wondering the availability of if you recently graduated, are these opportunities still available to you, or are there non-student internships available?
That is a really good question, and I do not have the answer off the top of my head. Please feel free to email me at my email address too, and I can help track that down. It should say in those links that I shared as well. It should have like the qualifications. I don't remember off the top of my head, and I'm getting what I think I know mixed with past jobs internship programs. And so yeah, please feel free to email me or as well, like check there should be like the eligibility list in those links as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Angie has a question, and I think we kind of answered this with the map gallery, but she wants to know if you have this idea of a type of map that you want to create or different functionalities, would you recommend posting questions like starting points to the Esri community on what software you should use to make this product or make this map? Or do you think the map gallery is a good starting point and looking at the different software? What do you think the best kind of resources are?
I would honestly say both. It might help to do an exploratory, like look at the map gallery first, just to kind of see like, okay, like what are people using with this or dashboards or these kind of things. But I would say, I would love more like cartographic community and just like idea thinking in the Esri community. But I would say like it's a space for it as well. Like there's the ideas where that's if you have like kind of software ideas, but then there's kind of questions and that sort of thing. And so it's not a bad space to post that and could get some feedback and ideas and whatnot as well. The other space I've seen, this is not Esri affiliated, but it's a Slack community called the Spatial Collective. And that is very much open to everyone. And so, but it's very much a space for GIS geography professionals. And I believe there's kind of like a just like a design or cartographic design like channel in that Slack. And I do see a lot of people post there like, oh, I have this idea, like, maybe this or that. And so that's a Slack community called the Spatial Collective. Again, not Esri affiliated, but it's very much like an open community for GIS, geography, and cartography folks to chat. Yeah.
Nice. And so I teach cartography within the program, and I see many of the students here tonight and alumni, and we use critiques as an opportunity for us to connect together as a community, whether we're using VoiceThread or we're using office hours, and it's like Hollywood Squares. We're all in office hours and we're sharing screens and looking over each other's shoulders. So it's nice to have that community to always ask, what do you think? Or do you like this? Does this work? Any suggestions? And then not taking it personal, right? Right. This is our work and we always want to improve upon it. So it's always getting those critiques. That's always incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful. And even asking kind of your fellow, like, um, like classmates or colleagues, or even in that small group can really be helpful at times too, like brainstorming, even the idea before you get to the tools. That's always a big proponent of that, is try to think through the idea even on just pen and paper before getting into like which tool to use and that kind of stuff, just as like a starting point to see like, is this kind of idea or the story fully formed before, like, I know when I jump straight into software, like I'm distracted by buttons and what's working, what's not. And sometimes it's like, okay, just pull back and see like, what does the story look like? What's the focus of the map? And even pen and paper, and that's coming from someone who's a terrible drawer, can be really helpful too. So I highly recommend that as well.
Love that, especially with layout, with pen and paper or on a napkin. If you're just thinking of layout and you're trying to figure out all the different map components to be there, where does it all fit? I think it's a good opportunity for napkin drawing or piece of paper.
Yes. Yeah.
Juliana has a great question that feeds right into what we were talking about here. And she wants to know, are there any specific tips or tricks that you use when trying to figure out how to best represent data that you were given? This is more geared towards data that you might not have a good background on or any prior knowledge.
Yeah, definitely hit this a lot when I worked more in the journalism side of things, because oftentimes like the maps and data visualizations we made would be completely driven by the news and the world and a lot of different things. So just a lot of different topics, which also helps being a geographer and thinking about things in that kind of like broader way. Um, and so in terms of like working with a data set not as familiar with, obviously one of those is dropping into your software of choice. And sometimes that's the first thing I do, just to get a lay of the land, like what's in there, especially if you think about something that's like a table, whether it's an Excel table or a attribute table, if you're working with GIS, like what's in there, like what do I have available? And depending on that, then I'll kind of step away before I start trying to like map, visualize all this stuff, and just honestly like go see like journal articles, like what else have people written on this, like what's the research, what does this mean. Going back to like when we were reporting on a lot of the COVID stuff, I'm just reminded of it because of the dashboard, but it was very much like had not mapped anything in that realm ever before that news event happened. And I it was very much going to journal articles, going to the research, seeing, how are other news agencies covering this? How are other like, medical kind of news sites covering this, and kind of seeing that spectrum to better understand. And so those are kind of my steps, is like, take a look at the data, see what you have available. Do you even have enough available to visualize it or analyze it or make a map? And then kind of see, okay, based on what I have, what does this mean? And so going to a lot of those journal articles, resources, just seeing what else is out there and kind of comparing and contrasting. That's often how we would do it in the newsroom. Yeah.
And normally you're working under a short time frame too. So you have this
Yes.
process in place where you're doing quick background
Yeah.
research and then moving forward with the purpose and the audience, which I have to say as a, cartography instructor, you cannot make a map without a purpose and knowing the audience that's going to be using that. It's incredibly important.
Yes.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And in the newsroom too, we did have like expert reporters on staff that could literally walk up to their desk, and I could walk up to the desk of the person who focuses a lot on health topics and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Does this make sense? But if you don't have those resources, it's seeing kind of what's going on in the world, how it's being reported on, how it's being written about in journal articles, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Excellent. Marcella has a question for us, joining us from Italy. So thank you for being here, and is curious about international opportunities within the Esri branches.
Yeah.
Where would you
So
go to?
yeah, so there are a lot of like R&D, which stands for Research and Development Centers, actually in Europe, all over the globe, for Esri. So Esri has a lot of different offices in a lot of different places. I I do not know 100% if there's one in Italy, but I know there are many throughout Europe. So at least geographically, they're a little bit closer than California or the U.S. And so there are a lot of different offices in Europe. I'm not sure about internships, but those would be posted on the Esri Jobs website or on that internship page. But my understanding is most of the internships are based in California at the main office, but I would definitely look at the Esri Jobs site to be sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. One thing that I wanted to mention, and I really appreciate you touching this in the beginning when you were talking about your background, is that previous positions that you held had there was nothing cartography in the title. And I think that's important. As I was kind of reflecting on my own journey, I was a backcountry ranger and I would end up making maps, or talking to travelers. I would always be pulling out maps or improving upon our park maps. And there was nothing in there about cartography or even GIS. And I feel like there's always an opportunity if you're in a position where it's open to either move in that map direction, visualization direction. And that's where, your skills come in. You can take a position and then improve upon that, add your own touch, add your own, visualization. So I really appreciate you mentioning that early on as folks are looking for positions within the visualization and cartographic sector.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was in college, like I just always searching for jobs is always GIS into the into the search engine. And then it was kind of like over time realized like, oh, like a lot of there's some like sneaky GIS mapping geography positions that don't have that in the title, but very much involve that work and expertise. Yeah.
Okay, a question came in from Bisma. What opportunities are there to connect with the AI community? Would that be
Yeah.
going
So
to like a blog, or is there another blog specifically focused on AI?
Yeah, so the ArcGIS blog, there's a lot of different posts and articles being posted about AI, the work that Esri's doing, as well as like what's being added in each new software release for the different software products. Esri community also has, that's a space to talk about all things Esri and ArcGIS. And so there's definitely conversations happening there with AI and work with AI, and especially questions around like, use cases like for a lot of the stuff that's already in the software too. So, and also ideas. So again, the Esri community for posting ideas and thoughts on like what could be helpful in that AI space as well. So for Esri specific, those are the two places that I would point folks at. Yeah.
Excellent. So I think I'll pause a second. If there's any questions that are lingering out there, I would recommend folks asking them. I have a question for you. And I'm just curious, what is what is your passion project? When you think about, one of your projects that you worked on, it comes first to mind that this was one that just really stands above the rest. Could you share that project with us?
Yeah, I think it probably changes depending on the day, but the one that is when you asked that, it came to mind was this project I worked on when I was still at the Washington Post. It was mapping the Appalachian Trail, and it was a piece on how the Appalachian Trail actually like changed course over the years. So there actually like the original route was slightly different, and it really changed just based on kind of land ownership stuff and a lot of different factors that the article and the reporter I worked with, Lizzie Johnson, really dove into with her incredible writing and interviews. And for that, I got to make this giant long like scrolling map that essentially animated that trail and highlighted the parts of the trail um, that where the Appalachian Trail used to go, but no longer goes, just based on a lot of different factors. And so that was a really cool project. Just getting to make a map that big for the web and scrolling the entire trail, but also because to find where the information on where those trails used to be, we went back to archival maps. And so we went to George Mason University, and the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. They have these huge archives of the Appalachian Trail and a lot of maps. And so went to those maps and scan them, georeference them, and so that we could draw parts of the former trail to highlight how the trail had changed over time. So that's the project that comes to mind today. Speaking with you
I
all,
love,
yeah.
love you brought that one up because I see one of our outstanding cartography alumni in the group, Chris Wozniak, who did his cartographic final. Was it final? I think it was the midterm. Might have been I'm sorry, Chris, I can't remember if it was midterm or final, but focused on the impact of Hurricane Helene on the Appalachian Trail and the linear aspect of it, and even just the storm track. Oh, it was his midterm. Thank you.
It's
Yeah. And it showed up in the map gallery last year. It won regional awards. So I love that you brought that topic up. And Chris, I'm glad that you're here tonight to hear that, because I know that was a passion project for you, and just integrating extreme weather and then just from the impact of this weather event on this significant trail. Yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds really, really cool. I'm glad I shared that one. Maybe there's something in the air that like made me reference that one.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, so
Yeah.
we're nearing the end of tonight's session. Are there any lingering questions out there? Just a lot of great questions. Thank you guys for being here tonight. And Lauren, thank you for sharing with us tips and tricks and resources and everything that's out there. And for those that are here, I just want to remind you, are going to skip GIS After Dark for March and then come back April 2nd. We'll be sharing our new applied remote sensing class that we're working on that is integrating AI for imagery. And we'll be bringing the new instructor on to talk a little bit more about that. And with that said, let's just go ahead and give another round of applause for Lauren virtually. Again, thanks for taking the time to be here. And her contact information is on the screen if you have any questions. And again, if you're interested in learning more about our program, please consider attending the information session on February 17th. I will be there, so I'll be able to chat with you more about the program and then highlight the amazing instructors that we have and our students' work. With that said, Lauren, thank you again. And for those attending, great to have you here. Thank you for being a part of the community, and look forward to seeing you April 2nd. So have a good evening and keep mapping.